Tonight, sirens are going off in Israel, warning residents of possible incoming rockets as the bloody conflict between Israel and Hamas continues. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Shayna Humphreys. We begin with the latest on the war in the Middle East. Tonight, Israel continues to target Hamas in Gaza with airstrikes. At least 10 people were killed when a missile hit a 3-story apartment building. Dozens of people were injured. So far, the Israel Defense Forces strikes have reportedly killed 3,000 people since the initial attack by Hamas on October 7th. Meanwhile, officials in Egypt are reportedly getting ready to open the Rafah border crossing tomorrow. At least 25 trucks carrying humanitarian aid have been stuck there at the border. Fire trucks and diggers have been brought in to repair the roads that were destroyed by Israeli airstrikes, and some shelters have been set up for aid workers who are waiting there. Joining us tonight to discuss the latest is retired Army Colonel Gerald Faunt. Thanks for joining us, as always.
Thanks for having me again.
So the president has left Israel after this rare wartime visit. Are we expecting this ground invasion that we've been hearing may start at any moment since this all began? Are we expecting that to happen sooner now?
I believe that what the Israelis are doing is this is going to be a conditions-based start, not a time-based start. So when they set the conditions within the Gaza Strip, they will do that. And I have to give you kudos from the other night. You asked a good question, and it almost got me there, and I should have extended myself to get there. But slightly better question would have been, instead of why did Hamas poke the bear, why did Iran have Hamas poke the bear?
Sure.
The Abraham Accords. So now that has been scuttled with Saudi Arabia. So their Abraham Accords were set up under the previous administration, whereby Muslim countries are starting to actually normalize relations with Israel and recognize them. So it was Morocco, Sudan, Bahrain, and I think it was the Emirates. Okay. So those four countries. So that's what really scuttled that. I think what we're going to see now is that the Israelis are going in, and again, they're setting those conditions. They're going in. And a lot of these are like a reconnaissance and force. They're getting a lot of intelligence, and they're also going in to try to get hostages. What we're going to see is we're going to see a 3-block, 3-dimensional fight. What I mean by 3 blocks is that within one city block, you're going to see a combined arms breach with infantry, armor, engineers supported by indirect fires from mortars and artillery and close air support. In another block in the city, you're going to see population-centric counterinsurgency, where they're going to try to separate the terrorists from the Palestinian population. The Israelis are going into this knowing that they cannot make more enemies than they've gone into this with. So they're going to probably do everything they can to protect the Palestinian population at great risk to their own forces. And definitely try to abide by international law as much as possible, because again, they cannot make more enemies than they already have. And then in the third block, you're going to have a direct action hostage rescue situation. So this will be all simultaneously ongoing through this as they sectorize the northern portion of the Gaza Strip. And the context is interesting because Terrence brought it on up. When you look at the Gaza Strip, it's about it is the landmass the size of the city of Detroit. When you look at the population, if you look at the heyday of Detroit and add another 25%, so the mid-50s, and add 25% more, that's the population of Gaza. And now what you're asking, what they're telling them to do is, I want everybody east of Woodward Avenue to move west of Woodward Avenue, and then we're going to go into east of Woodward Avenue.
Not a simple thing to do.
Not a simple thing to do.
So speaking of things that are not simple, what are the challenges of war, of fighting war in an urban location like this? It's not an open field.
Yeah, military operations in urban terrain are the most difficult and always are the very wariest of things that we wish to do. So that's where a 3-dimensional fight now comes in, because now you not only have to worry about elevation with high-rise buildings, with snipers are fighting positions up there, but you also have the ground fight as you're trying to clear obstacles, and then you have the subterranean fight. So it's incredibly difficult and daunting. However, is it absolutely impossible? No. When you look at nation-on-nation warfare, Israel has been very successful in that since the inception of their country in 1948, 1956, of course, 1967, and in 1973, despite being surprised in Yom Kippur War, they came out of that. Where Iran has seen where they're not so good at is not on nation fighting, but fighting against terrorist organizations where it's asymmetric warfare like this.
Yeah.
So that is seen as a possible weakness.
You mentioned there will be attempts to separate Hamas from hostages or civilians. How do you do that? Hamas isn't walking around wearing signs that say we're Hamas or uniforms, correct?
They're not wearing uniforms, so they're not uniformed combatants. However, as you've seen during the Israeli, the strike that happened, the errant missile that hit the hospital, the Baptist hospital there, is you saw where Israel did release a method insofar as how they're being able to identify some of these people. So that was possibly low-level voice intercept. We did that throughout Iraq and Afghanistan, where they were actually listening in. So I believe that for years that the Israeli intelligence apparatus has been identifying who the leaders of Hamas are, where they tend to congregate, trying to understand where their communication, command and control nodes are, sustainment nodes are, where those are, and identify them. And then using signals intelligence and other intelligence collection means to be able to identify who's where and what. Sometimes people get sloppy with using a cell phone as SIM cards. So.
Yeah. Now, aren't at least some of the Hamas leaders in Qatar?
Yeah, so some of the senior leaders of, it's the broader organization, yes, are in Qatar. But
so what happens with them? They just sit there while this all occurs in Gaza? Then what?
Well, I think that's a broader issue insofar as how do you, once you deconstruct Hamas tactically and operationally, how do you deal with them strategically? And this is, nothing moves, Shana, around the world without money. And, military folks sometimes don't completely understand this. But you can't do anything without money. So if Hamas was unable to get money to do the things that they're doing now from Iran, and if Iran wasn't able to derive its money by, we have not enforced the sanctions on oil sales, and specifically I think the oil sales to China have almost tripled. So they're getting a lot of money there. They're about ready to expire the sanctions on Iranian military sales. So that's another source of income. And again, we've been pretty sloppy about our money. Look at the $6 billion that was evidently going to be used for humanitarian aid. But then what then is Iran says, okay, so that's $6 billion for food and medicine, whatever. Now we can use this $6 billion over here. It's very fungible.
Yeah.
So it's all about the money. If we would come up with a coherent strategy to strangle off money, then you can't do things.
And to wrap things up on that note, is there any chance we see Iran become directly involved in this conflict at any point?
Again, with the Israeli history about state-on-state warfare, I don't think Iran wants to do that. And I think that if Iran were to do that, then if I was setting policy, I'd be telling them you don't want to do that.
Not a
no
advisable
uncertain
thing
terms,
to do. All right.
You don't want to do that.
This is retired Army Colonel Gerald Faunt. As always, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.